What's up, family, and welcome back to another Bible study with the next pastor. So glad to have you in here with me today. This has been one hell of a ride, and I've been enjoying every single step of the way. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have a reason to. And just to kind of hit as an announcement, normally I have a big, I'll have a flyer or something, but in this case, there is no flyer primarily because it's been hot in my house, and so it's hard to concentrate and get stuff done, even though I have been getting stuff done. But guess what? We crossed the threshold of 3,000 subscribers this week. Isn't that amazing? Like it's just absolutely mind blowing to me. Again, we started this year with 52 subscribers on this channel, and just all of a sudden, what a boom! And then so just major shout out to people like Brady Goodwin on Ichabod, Stacy and Dee from the Stacy's Mom podcast. And Tim Mills from Harmonic Atheist. These were people who were very instrumental, just by virtue of what they were already doing in the community for really platforming my voice, my ideas, and my perspective. And then also we've had great partnership with Mandisa Thomas of Black Nonbelievers, doing great work with the ACA. And we've actually got some new things coming in this week, some new opportunities coming in this week as well. And I'm doing my best to kind of balance it all, take it all in stride. I guess as the old church say, trying to stay humble. Not really. That's just, you know, uh, I honor humility. It's just no longer one of my primary goals. I prefer that just to be really more of a side effect of me being me, as opposed to me questioning everything I do, saying, "All right, now are you staying humble?" Which was almost like torture going through that, in the church world, especially um, growing up in a society where self-esteem was such an issue. It was such a hot topic that adolescents were struggling with their self-esteem, trying to find pride in themselves. And I think part of that, I mean, if you listen to that, trying to find pride in yourself, if you're deeply entrenched within religion or hyper spirituality, then that likely sounds unhealthy. That likely sounds evil, sounds bad. Pride in yourself. You're not supposed to have pride in yourself. Pride goes before the fall. Pride is one of the seven deadly sins. What are you talking about? And so it became almost, nearly impossible to balance this idea of holy humility and healthy self-esteem. Yeah, I like that. Holy humility and healthy self-esteem. It becomes very difficult to actually balance those things. Now, I am all for humility. I don't think, you know what? Actually, I'm probably not as offended by arrogance as I used to be. Like I used to be just incredibly, oh, the nerve. Now it just doesn't bother me anymore at all. And I know we're going to jump into this, but I want to give you a little insight of why it doesn't bother me. Which and it turns out that it actually never bothered me. But I was definitely part of an ideology that had determined what a righteous character was and what a righteous character was not. And these characteristics were based off of whoever's interpretation of scripture. Often, mine mixed with somebody else's who I look up to, and say, yeah, this is the best way to be. And now, I do live in a place where I kind of embrace this idea of nuance and complexity. That life is much more complex than I actually thought, and that actually trying to create a blueprint of what good human behavior is and bad human behavior is outside of actual harm to each other is likely going to end up with some very harmful consequences. So for me now, I live more so along the lines of anybody has the right to kind of be whoever they want to be, behave however they want to be. And I have a right to determine whether or not I consider that behavior conducive or congruent with my own behavior, my life pace, my life rhythms, if you will. And so, which in a nutshell, that's just social consequences, right? So, and what and the reason I or not the reason, but one of the many reasons, or one of the many things that I observed or observed repeatedly, is that I would have these blueprints. And this was definitely when I was in the faith. I'd have kind of these blueprints or these models or these archetypes, if you will, of what a healthy person was based off of scripture or my understanding of scripture. And if a person wasn't that, then my mind was, you're not a good person, you're not a great person, and blah, 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 blah. But and typically I was going by some of the things that other people said were bad. But like I noticed, like for example, arrogance. Because that's what started this conversation. And this is still the introduction. I promise you, we're going to get in Bible study in a few. We actually just have one chapter today, so this is kind of this is fun talk. But arrogance. Quite a few of the pastors that I worked for were highly arrogant. And I mean, and they were highly arrogant while also preaching that, arrogance is bad, and there was this conversation that was common conversation that, hey, you shouldn't be prideful, you shouldn't be arrogant. But it seemed to be, it was okay for the pastor to be arrogant, or even the worship leader, if they were really, really good, it was okay for them to be arrogant. And so and nobody actually stopped supporting these people because they were arrogant. And so what I begin to realize is that there are some personality types that are high friction, and people who tend to be what we describe as arrogant. We describe them so typically based off of the amount of friction that their personality creates with other personalities. And typically those other personalities are often more passive personalities, not necessarily so. But I did find that even for me, it was often hard for me to draw the line between uh, um, assertiveness and arrogance. Okay, because now I realize that my whole definition or my whole blueprint or archetype of how to engage in the world was based off of these outdated, antiquated scriptural ideas that represented societal norms that have since evolved. And so, which is this idea of basically that I don't actually need other people to behave just like me in order to have a productive society. It's just more important that I recognize whether I'm going to be able to have a productive relationship with certain types of behaviors or personality types. And even that can be a slippery slope, but I find that to be much more healthier than just saying, oh, this person is arrogant, they're a bad person, or oh, this person is greedy, they're a bad person, or oh, this person drinks a lot, they're a bad person, or oh, this person smokes a lot, they're a bad person, or oh, this person eats sugars, so they're a bad person. And that was something, these were things that I became incredibly averse to, even as a pastor. And so I still share that aversion now that I've deconstructed. It's that aversion that plays a major role in my own deconstruction and deconversion, is wanting to be a person that is truly people centric. Again, because my theological grounding was that God was people centric, that God wanted what was best for people. And so that's become my journey. Am I God? No, let me stop. But no, that's become my journey. And ultimately, that's what humanism is to me. Um, and in this book that I've talked about for a while, it's nowhere near finished. And the reason it's nowhere near finished, because there are certain conversations that I want to have before I finish it. One of the conversations that I want to have is with Dr. Anthony Penn. And this book is The Case for Religion, by the way. In this book, I'll be trying to present the historical and sociological evolution of religion as a march towards humanism. That the number one goal and priority and obsession of all religions has always been humans, it's humanity. So I kind of show that all religions up to this moment, and even probably beyond this moment, are just corrupt versions of humanism, of humans trying to figure out what's best for humans. The biggest mistake is when we rely on yesterday to determine what's best for today, and even when we rely on what's best today to determine what's best for tomorrow. I think we have learned enough, or we should have learned enough by now to know that that's not necessarily a dependable way of engaging life. And so we have to consistently live in the now, learning from yesterday in consideration of tomorrow, but doing our best not to trap our today into the misunderstandings of yesterday. Wow, this has been a long introduction. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Consider joining our community. Ooh, here's something else exciting. Consider joining our community. Guess what? We are reformatting our website right now in the middle of it. I told you, I stay busy. I don't call myself hyper productive to flatter myself. I call myself hyper productive just because I hope somebody say, well, damn, let me help this man. But yeah, we are reformatting our website. So instead of people who want to volunteer and getting involved, having to go through Microsoft Forms, and then we're having to capture that information that way and then pass it off to whoever. We are building it all on our website now, where we're building a full volunteer tracking system, a VTS, where you will be able to review every role that we have available. You'll be able to submit your interest for each role. And it will go into our database, and our team will be able to stay in contact with you that way. So that's some exciting news. Some other exciting news while you're liking this video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that alert notification bell, and doing that scavenger hunt to figure out all the ways that you can join this community. We're coming up on the first Sunday in August. So guess what that means? That means it is another ex-pastor call-in show. And I know oh my goodness, I hope y'all are as excited about it as I am. The first show went off just literally without a hitch. It was absolutely amazing. I'm so grateful for everybody who participated. So grateful for having Kyle Butler as a co-host, who's also a former ex-pastor, who I am doing my best to gently recruit over into the Bridge family and BridgeCity Global, just because he has so much to offer. So listen, if you I was gonna say if you don't have plans, but fuck that. I don't care if you do have plans. Put it on your calendar, man. You want to be at the ex-pastor call-in show, and if you've had questions that you've always wanted to ask a pastor, or if you're deconverting, or you're deconstructing, or you're just trying to explore life beyond superstition, trying to figure out what's next, this is a great opportunity to call in. We're not necessarily doing debates on this show, though I absolutely love debates. Just not on my channel for the most part, because this channel is all about community. Everything you see on this channel is a product of BLDD World Group and the Bridge, also BridgeCity Global. And this is just our way of doing our best to play our part in, number one, building a global hub of authentic leadership. I am unapologetically looking for leaders who are concerned with the global state and the global progress of humanity, for the sole purpose of social change, social elevation and progress, with a intimate focus on future generations, really just making this world a better place for future generations, our children, our grandchildren, other people's children and grandchildren and great grandchildren, the people that have to inherit this planet 1,000 years from now. I think it's time that we start being mindful like that. And so literally everything on this channel is a march towards that. Even this show, Bible Study with an Ex-Pastor. All right, so for those of you who are watching to mark this, you can let them know we're about to jump in right now. We're getting ready to jump in. For those of you who are watching who may have been misled by the title, I don't know how you were, but it's Bible Study with an Ex-Pastor. So if you're looking for this to be a deep dive in the Word, and to be something that's going to strengthen your relationship with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, this is not the show for you. If you are looking for something that is going to help you get even just a more academic understanding of the Bible, while we do drop some of those insights in here, and many of our commenters and people in chat will share some of that information, That is not the primary goal of this particular segment. So this may or may not be the show for you. If you are a believer and you don't want to be offended, I encourage you to choose a different YouTube channel at this moment, because I am an atheist and I am somewhat irreverent. And so if you have a high regard for scripture as something holy and as something sacred and as something not to be mangled with, turn the channel. Turn the channel. I'm encouraging you now. All right, for everybody else, we are jumping back in. Guess what? We are closing out the book of Genesis. We have made it, I think, what, 20 in 24 episodes? In 24 episodes, we have made it through 49, or 23 episodes, we've made it through 49 chapters. And in the 24th episode, we are closing out the final chapter of the book of Genesis, which is in Genesis chapter 50, which I actually have to roll my page back up. I had scrolled all the way back down. Genesis chapter 50, which starts with Jacob is buried. Of course, we closed out last week. Very excited that Jacob had finally died. Please forgive me if you hear my trash truck in the background. They just choose to come at the most opportune times. And of course, I also have a fan running to kind of keep things cool for a while. I'm recording earlier in the day for obvious reasons, for those of you who know. It's hot. All right, so Jacob is dead, but now they want to spend some extra time talking to us about his burial. Let's see how the book of Genesis closes out and see if we can pull something from this that creates some valuable conversation. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. I wonder, is Jacob the first Hebrew to be embalmed? Now 40 days were required for it, for such is the period required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. The Egyptians wept for Jacob for 70 days. What for? For what reason? Why come? I just, I can't, there's nothing in this story to that would even give me the slightest inclination that the people of Egypt would be celebrating Jacob. You know, I get them celebrating Joseph, and even in that, just kind of barely as a one-off. And I also kind of shared some problems with this story. Remember, Egypt has people who can turn staffs into serpents, but they didn't have anybody who could interpret a dream. And just remember, when it comes to interpreting dreams, nobody knows if you wrong. Not until it's much too late. So anybody literally could have lied. So, I often, say it's very easy to tell when someone's trying to scam you, because they always overplay their hands. And the book of Genesis, especially from chapter 37 up until now, well, even a little bit before then with some of Abraham's stuff, is definitely an extreme overplay of hands. It seems like an encouraging story, but there's just not enough backstory to make it even believable. And I'm not even saying to make it real, to make it historical, because I don't have that need. I don't need this to be historical for it to be believable, right? And there are plenty of fiction stories, because I'm a reader and I'm an author. But when I'm reading stories, even if it's fiction, I still want it to be believable. And the biggest issue with Joseph's story and Jacob's story and Abraham's story, well, hell, for that matter, Noah's story, Adam's story, Cain's story, it's just that these stories have no sense of believability to them, which should be expected, because the people who would be contriving these stories would have an absolutely limited worldview. Most of them, I'm saying with, and I'm being generous here, most of them, with rare exception, would have a worldview that is vastly more limited, oxymoron paradox type of thing there, more limited than a person today who's had no education, or no, or didn't have good education, right? This person would still know um, that there are other continents. This person would still know that there are other cultures. This person would, so so some of this is to be expected, but when you compare it to other literature from the same time. Ooh, and this is going to step on some toes because popular Christian propaganda is that the Bible, of course, is the best-selling book of all times, which I often remind people that when you factor that in about it being the best-selling book of all times, you have to factor in the amount of churches who are buying them in large droves to give them away, and you have to factor in the amount of organizations who that's literally what they exist for, is to buy Bibles and give them away, such as the Gideons, and print Bibles. I was going somewhere with that. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, but they say, oh, it's the most popular book. This book has had more impact on anything than anybody else. Number one, the only people who say that are people who are really not well informed. And when I say that, I'm not saying that it's just dumb people saying it. I'm saying there are smart people out there who are still not well informed on the things that they talk about. Just because someone has demonstrated intellect in one field does not mean that they are automatically intelligent across all spectrums. This is why I don't waste time a lot of times with people who want to debate in my comments. That's showing me that your social cues are not that great. Like, come on, buddy. But people who kind of think in those terms do so because they haven't challenged these ideas, nor have they challenged their own biases when it comes to these ideas. Because the truth of the matter is that yes, while the Bible has been commercially successful, primarily due to well, colonialism, imperialism that spawns from, of course, the Holy Roman Empire and then the Church of England and then some things in between. You have a lot of authoritative regimes who impose the Bible on its subjects, right? But if you really want to know how serious the Bible is taken, you have to look within the academia of literature. And there it is not treated as so beautiful and so lovely and so rich and so unique. It doesn't even make the top 10 when it comes to historical literature. But when I say historical literature, I don't mean literature that is historically accurate. It just means literature from historical periods. I almost said prehistoric. That's not what that is. But you kind of get the point. And the reason why it doesn't have that appreciation is because it just doesn't tell those great, especially in the beginning. The stories are not that great. This is coming from someone who preached it for over a decade. You have to make the stories great. The only way that the stories in the Bible are truly captivating is through a process that we call eisegesis, which is the idea of taking stuff that's not in the text and putting it there. You have to make up all of these flattery things about David. You have to make up these extra demonic things about Saul. You have to make up these wonderfully tense battles of friction between Moses and his inner dialogue. But these things don't exactly exist in the text. We have to impose, oftentimes anachronistically, our own way of perceiving things onto the text to make it remotely interesting, engaging, or otherwise relevant. Its only relevance outside of that is because of the harm that has been done using it. The Bible is still relevant because harm is still being done. The Bible is still relevant because the people who believe it want to still continue doing the things they were doing. Yep. All right. That was a lot to get just in these first. Just because I couldn't believe that the Egyptians are crying over Jacob. Now, again, them crying over Joseph based off of the narrative, I could buy it. It still wouldn't be believable, but I could buy it. But them crying over Jacob, I'm like, they wouldn't care about this, man. Stop this. Stop the madness. All right, verse 4. When the days of mourning for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh, saying, interesting. My father made me swear, saying, okay, how many more times they going to say saying? Behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now then, please let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return. Okay, so this is Joseph talking to the Pharaoh, and then Joseph is talking about what his dad said to him, and it's this language right here. Behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself. If I was still in the position of pastoring, I'd preach the message. Let me do it the way I would do it in church. If you would, if you're not too mean, go ahead and tag your neighbor and say, I did this to myself. I did this to myself. In today's text, now let me stop. But no, that I would literally teach this, or preach this rather, as I did this to myself. And especially if I would have remained pastoring while being an atheist, and would have strategically just kind of kept sewing in some stuff in there along the way, which is something that I unashamedly encourage pastors to do. If you're in the pulpit and you depart from the faith, maybe try to use that position to sew in some good stuff, because we kind of need soldiers on the battlefield. We need some agents out there. But no, I think I would preach this as I did this to myself. Behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself. Let us consider these last words of Abrahamic Christianity. Let us consider these the last words of the Abrahamic faiths, that we are now standing at the eulogy. We are now standing at the threshold of the end of a thing that should have long ended long ago. But when if anybody asks, how did we get here? How did we get here where religion had become so distasteful, so harmful, so irreverent of humanity, and so irrelevant to our progress, that we are now at the point where we are putting the final nail in the coffin? When we get here, my hope would be that Christianity would speak up for itself and say, behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself. Y'all don't hear me out there. Your boy is preaching. I did this to myself. That should be religion's last refrain. That should be the death cry of religion. Its last words as it goes down in history. Its last words. This should be the death cry of superstition. It should be the death cry of anything that allows us to put our imaginations over humanity. The death cry should be, I did this to myself. Now that was just off the rip, but damn, I like that. Yep, that's it. Like, oh my goodness. I do want to write a whole speech on that now. Like, I want to write a whole essay on this. I want to write a paper. I think I want to write a thesis. This might be a dissertation. Behold. Like, isn't that an excellent quote? Okay, it's going to be a book. That's what it is. It's going to be a book. My father made me swear, saying, behold, I am about to die in my grave, which I dug for myself. I mean, does anybody else see how Christianity has dug this grave for itself? Like, if you didn't see it before Donald Trump, and it's really not just Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump represents much of what I saw in evangelicalism, which is very odd because Donald Trump is obviously not an evangelical. Yeah, a whole nother other situation. But yes, this when I look at it, man, like these words, they just spoke to my mind that this is it. Listen, if I was a prophet, I'd say that these words are prophetic. That Christianity is about to die in the grave that it dug for itself. Superstition is about to die in the grave that it dug for itself. Oh my goodness, this is good. Oppression is about to die in the grave that it dug for itself. Oh, come on now, somebody. Now, in a church, everybody would be going absolutely crazy, and this would be like an epic moment in church. And people would be like, preach, prophesy, walk, prophet, walk, bishop, teach, doc, come on, apostle, all of those good things. And then what I just realized is even while doing that, even if I was, in an unreligious context and I didn't use the words prophecy, but I just said, hey, I came to let somebody know, or or listen, I came to tell you, I came to be a sign, I came to be a witness, or I came to be an example that bad politics has dug its own, is getting ready to die in a grave that it is dug for itself. It would evoke a very similar emotional reaction based off of what is socially acceptable in that climate, right? And so if I did it at a political rally, you're likely going to get some responses that are very similar to church responses. Um, but I like to add to that me saying it, nobody saying it means anything. Yes, we should get excited about the possibility of those things. And this is what bothered me about being a preacher, especially the last decade of being a preacher, is that much of what we were preaching were just fluff. It was things that would get people excited, but didn't have any correlation with an actual plan. And this is actually why I kind of consider this is why I don't take stances that other people take when it comes to politics, because I honestly don't give a damn what you say unless we're talking about plans and policies. And in most cases, when I hear politicians promising or planning to do things, it's things that are completely outside of the scope of their position, which I find to be incredibly disingenuous and downright deceptive. But it's absolutely indicative of a larger societal issue of people don't know how to recognize when someone is lying to you. Like, case in point, if a politician tells you that they're going to promise you that they can do something that only the legislative branch can do, then this person is lying to you. Why talk to me about something that your branch can't do? Talk to me about something that your branch can get done. Okay, that's just me. One of my rants. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I care. Like, I care about these things. I care about people. I hate the fact that, like, literally every election that I've been a part of, and I'm not just talking about the ones that I've been able to vote in, I'm talking about every election that I've been able to consciously engage since I was a child, was just more of the same. It's either pointing at each other, saying, this is the bad guy and I come to save you. Well, guess what? I don't need any fucking saviors. And that's not how democracy works. Democracy has no saviors. But the truth of the matter is, no government does. All government is at the will of the consent. The quicker we educate people to understand that, the quicker we realize that we all have a responsibility in what government currently is. Because whatever government currently is, we are either currently cooperating with it or not currently doing anything to change it. That was a weird rabbit trail, but it was there. It was there. I pulled it from here. We're just going again off of the fluff of this moment of how I can get people excited. Yes, Christianity is about to die. Religion is about to die. And these are the things that dictators and authoritative regimes that they prey on. They prey on, like, even the legal system preys on these type of antics, where it's not necessarily about critically engaging what is reality, what is possible, what is feasible. It's just about who tells the better story. And get mad at me if you want to, but shame on us for that. Like, yikes. Okay. let's continue. All right. Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father as he made you swear." So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. All the elders of the land of Egypt. Bruh, come on now. The math doesn't math. So all of the elders of the land of Egypt, and then all of the elders of Pharaoh's household, and then all of Joseph's servants, they all fit in Canaan. They all going over here, and they all fitting in Canaan. This is probably why Canaan is pissed off, because you just done overcrowded our spot. And I can imagine the other elders in Egypt getting like, I got to go to whose funeral for what? I don't know this man. Yeah, this is overplayed your cards here. And all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household, they left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. Chariots with teams of horses also went up with him, and it was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they mourned there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed 7 days of mourning of his father. Now, when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians." Therefore, it was named Abel Mitzram, which is beyond the Jordan. Okay, again, interesting to me. A lot of things going on here. Canaanites see all of the Egyptians and in Canaan, and they say this is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians, and so they name it Abel Mitzram, which I do know from my studies that Mitzram is Egypt. Abel is Meadow. Okay, so the mourning of Egypt. So Egypt is mourning here. That reminds me of a song. It's morning. And we slept the night away. Okay, I know it's not that type of mourning, but still, but the mourning of the Egyptians, and this translation has the mourning for the Egyptians, which would absolutely be inaccurate, but it's very interesting. But it's a grievous mourning. So not only did all these elders come, but these elders are so overwhelmed that they acting like black people at a funeral, crying all over the casket and falling out, and I can't breathe. I can't breathe. That's my mama. Oh, that's my mama for me. Oh, that's my mama. And you're going through all of that, and the Canaanites are like, damn, the Egyptians must have really loved Jacob. And of course, it's not the Egyptians, but actually the Mitzramites, which again, one of those things that I do call out in scripture, and I don't know who to hold accountable for this, if this is the translators or the original scribes, because perhaps the original scribes would have been calling Egypt Mitzram all throughout the text. And actually, I think that is the case. Almost positive it is that Egypt is referenced as Mitzram. It's the translators who want to drive this point home, that it's Egypt, which could be problematic for a lot of reasons. And that was one of the things, even again with my kind of deconstruction, is just realizing how much bias existed at every stage of development of scriptural canon. Like, there's not one point of development where there is any unapparent bias. Every level of development for both the Hebrew canon and what we have come to know as the New Testament has glaring incidences, occurrences, occasions, and opportunity for bias. I mean, just glaring. And the more you see that, because of course, when you first become a Christian, you have this naive idea, and no one corrects this naive idea, which is how you know that there's nothing in this that's a part of this religious structure that is designed to help you verify its claims. Right? So, but when you first come into Christianity, you typically have an idea, or when I did, again, Christianity is not a monolith. When I became a Christian, and many of the people who I became Christians with, when I start serving the Lord, or when I was born into this society, the majority of the people that I came in contact with had this naive assumption that the Bible has always existed as one book, and whichever version of that book you have, um, and that's the way God gave it to man. Yeah, yeah. It's only much later for many, and I can't even say many, it's only much later for some that you begin to realize, well, no, that's not actually how that happens. You'd be surprised to find out that it's only a minority of Christians who do not believe that the Bible was penned by God and given to man. Um, it's a minority of Christians who don't believe uh, that God spoke the words of the Bible to men, kind of like the Muhammad situation, which to be clear is a part of where that actually comes from. This Christian idea that, oh no, God spoke the Bible to somebody and gave it to him. That's someone, because and I'll only speak from the Black community, likely come from someone who has a long history of Christianity integrated with Islam that's not necessarily aware of that integration, as Islam was one of the many religions of West Africa, um, for many reasons, and just like the religion of Judaism and even the religion of Christianity. Um, when you remove the labels from religions, so you say this one is this and this one is this. Um, you actually begin to realize that Islam predates Islam, Judaism predates Judaism, Christianity predates Christianity. Um, or at least they all predate the labels. Not in the sense that they follow the doctrine of what has been established through institutional groups, but in the sense that these ideas did not evolve out of a vacuum. And so, yes, we want to say, no, nobody knew this until Muhammad, or nobody said this until Jesus, or nobody understood these things until Abraham or Moses. None of those claims are remotely true. I mean, just not even in the least, nowhere near it. And so, religion predates itself in that way, but in the same way that ideas predate themselves, the idea exists before the label, you know, and then someone decides to organize something around the idea, and that's where the label comes into play. But yeah, so let's close this thing out. Yep. And his sons did for him as he commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah opposite Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial site from Ephraim the Hittite. And after he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers had seen that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him?" All right, I actually want to kind of stop right here and kind of pivot back to a point I was making earlier about why the Bible academically isn't necessarily appreciated the same way as other historical literature tends to be. And here's probably the biggest reason why, is that the Bible isn't written to be literature, or the Bible isn't organized to be literature, right? And I think that's the thing that's probably been most apparent as we've been reading, and in all fairness, we've just been in the book of Genesis, but I think you'll find this to be all the way through. The Bible isn't organized. These stories aren't contrived for educational purposes or recreational purposes. These stories are contrived for political purposes. And so the stories of the Bible, by far and large, are all ethnocentric political propaganda. Yep, that's pretty much where that falls. And so this is why it's not trying to necessarily tell a unique story, nor is it even trying to provide a unique perspective on stories that have already been told, contrary to some people's understanding. And this is just my opinion, to be sure. But to me, it seems to be just trying to give a reason of how a people got into a predicament and what the way out of that predicament could possibly be. And this is why I say it's political propaganda. When we typically look at the Bible, especially those of us who had the naive relationship with it first, the idea is that, the story is kind of developing in real time, that first the people of Genesis are living and then they write Genesis, and then the people of Exodus are living and then they write Exodus, and then the people of Leviticus are living and then they write Leviticus, and so on and so on and so on. But no, that's not how this goes at all. All of these writings are somewhat scattered and come at different times, and in most part, especially the first five, are all written in time periods that are drastically removed from the time periods that they represent, which is somewhat of a standard for much of what's written in Scripture. Which should be a no duh for the first five books of the Bible, because Genesis claims to be referencing the beginning of all life on this planet. So, I mean, common sense, like yikes. But when you kind of make these things knowable or make these things known, it does kind of create friction in people's mind, because now it has to fight against that dissonance. But yeah, so these stories aren't exactly entertaining, because that's not what they were written to do, or I don't want to say written. That's such a faulty way of viewing the Bible. And that's why I like saying that's not what these stories were contrived to do. These stories were contrived to keep people in line and to kind of give people a rationale of why you need to be in line. It's almost like, listen, let me tell you how this all happened. In the beginning, we had everything. Everything was perfect. And then, we fucked it up a little bit, but then one of our ancestors gained God's favor and gave us the blueprint of how to live and how to be successful and how to be better than everybody else and how to be prosperous. But we just kept fucking it up. And these are all the different ways that we fucked it up. That's what the Bible is. And it gives us these narratives of God intervening, saying, yep, well, because you fucked up, this is why life is going to be hard for you. And so it's this political propaganda, no different than what we see happening right now in a U.S. election, where a group of people is trying to tell the majority of people the few reasons why your life is fucked up. And it's typically something, it's just like, well, you let this happen, or you didn't respect me this way, or you didn't honor me this way. And if you would have honored me, they wouldn't be able to do this, and so it's really that type of language. So yes, while the Bible has been prevalent because of politics, not because of relevance, not because of literary value. Its primary value, and I am one of those people who would consent and say that the Bible is absolutely valuable, but it's only valuable in the extent that it has been used as a political tool and a political weapon for a large period of time in human history, and that should not be forgotten or overlooked. We will never forget. I like that little spin. Okay. So, and you kind of see, and that's what you kind of see in this story. Is the story is a rationale of why, but we need to understand that throughout the entire Bible, the why is political. It is only in the more modern century that church has separated from politics. Prior to that, church was a political engine. The temple was a political engine. It is the emergence of democracy and the preforms, or the proto forms of democracy that we've seen emerging over the past 800 years, give or take, that has forced church out of the realm of politics. But this is why I did do the video that Christianity is all about Christian nationalism. I mean, the end goal of the story is Christian imperialism, that everybody worships Jesus across the globe, or they die, or not die. I'm sorry, they're eternally tormented. How is that not imperialism? How do we not realize that the aims of Christ are imperialistic? The language is clear: the kingdom of God. But as a people who have separated ourselves from these ideologies of kingdoms and things of that nature, it's very odd to me that we're still attaching to ideologies of Christianity as something that's not a threat to democracy, because it absolutely is. But the truth of the matter is, any form of religion that preferences an unverifiable entity over the real life experiences of verifiable humans is absolutely a threat to democracy, and is absolutely a threat to progressive humanity. And we don't have to fearmonger to get people to see that. Just look at the fucking history books, folks. You know, like all of the problems that we've been having to undo for the past 400 to 600, or what, 600 to 800 years. All of the problems that we've had to undo have largely come from our religious superstitions and misunderstandings. And many of the fights that we're still engaged in today are people who are trying to undo what we undid. In other words, means they're trying to redo it, because in our, I don't know what to call it yet, but we had an aversion to calling a spade a spade. And I believe we're at a place in humanity where it's time to start calling out delusional thinking for what it is, so that we don't make it so easy for people to succumb to it. We should call out delusional thinking just as vehemently as we call out pyramid schemes, because it's delusional thinking that's going to lead people to fall into pyramid schemes. You see how that cycle works? Okay. Which I hope you all notice that that's the nuance that I try to do. Like I don't like creating victims. I don't like creating villains. I like pointing out the things that are unproductive of all on all sides. So yes, it is absolutely horrible that somebody is out there trying to scam you out of your money, but also it is absolutely horrible that you're not doing what it takes to recognize a scam. Because I want to tell you, yes, there are some genius scams out there. They are rare. When I say rare, I mean super duper duper rare. Most scams that exist in the market that absolutely get people's attention look and sound like a scam. Okay. All right, let's wrap this up, cuz I actually have to get back to work. um so they sent instructions to Joseph saying, "Your father commanded us before he died, saying, 'This is what you shall say to Joseph. Please forgive, I beg you, the offense of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the offense of the servants of the God of your father.' And Joseph wept when they spoke to him." So did they just flat out lie? That's what that looks. Uh yeah. They sent instructions to Joseph and basically just made up stuff that Jacob says. Like I don't understand how we overlook this stuff. Um Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants," which at this moment is the fulfillment of one of the dreams that he had. But Joseph said to them, oh, I remember this one, "Do not be afraid, for I am in God's place." And I think it was the KJV that might have said, KJV or NIV, that may have read this, am I in the place of God, or am I not in the place of God? Um, and this little ending segment became very popular, especially in urban churches, because he says, "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to keep many people alive." That's such a powerful and profound statement. Profane. profound statement, but it absolutely does not reflect anything that has happened in these final few chapters. As though Joseph does seem to have the favor of God to thrive in Egypt, he also seems to be rejected by God in the evidence of his father not allowing him to bless his own sons, and then further punishing him by blessing the younger son instead of the older son, which on that one we can kind of float a little bit because apparently that's how it's been going in this family. But there is no evidence, at least from the characters or from God's mouth, that God wanted Joseph in Egypt. So, but what we do find that seems to run rampant in this family line is just making shit up as you go along. That's pretty much what they all seem to do, because we see Joseph's brothers just did it to him, and now Joseph is doing it to his brothers. Oh, God wanted me here this whole time, and consequently, this being the chapter that closes Genesis and leads to the children of Israel ultimately being enslaved, according to the narrative. This is also one of those scriptures that helps African Americans feel comfortable with their own prior enslavement. Is that what you meant for evil against me, God has worked and turned it around for my good. This is some of the disingenuousness of scripture, because you can't say that God has worked it for your good while also saying that it's clearly not good. Hello? And that was the dichotomy that I had to face with as well. I'm like, if this is a shining example of God's work, this dude sucks. If God turning slavery into the good for African people is the result that we have today, Sonia Massey, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray. See, the thing is, those are just the names that we know. Those are just the names that we sensationalize. And we sensationalize those names because they're dead. But we don't do anything to sensationalize the hundreds of thousands of African Americans who are in prison for marijuana charges, no violent charges. No, it's only important when it's sensationalized. Selective outrage. That's something that we as a species tend to fall victim to and fall prey to. That we're just waiting for somebody to tell us what to be mad at, as opposed to taking a realistic view of the world that we live in and determining that this is intolerable. We have to wait for someone else to give us permission to be upset. And to me, I find that intolerable. Okay. But yeah. I kind of want to talk about that more, but my time is running out and the temperature is rising. Now, Joseph stayed in Egypt, he and his father's household, and Joseph lived 110 years. I'm sorry, 110 years. My elementary math teachers would have died there. 110 would imply a decimal. Joseph saw the third generation of Ephraim's sons, also the sons of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were born on Joseph's knees. Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will assuredly take care of you and bring you up from this land to the land which he promised on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Which is so funny to me, because it's just like, you just left the land. You literally just buried your father in the land. Why didn't you just stay in the land? Like, everybody was in the land. I don't understand why y'all keep leaving the land and keep going back to the land. It just don't make sense at this moment. So then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, God will assuredly take care of you, and you shall carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110 years old, and they embalmed him and placed him in a coffin in Egypt. So just like Jacob, he gets embalmed, he gets placed in a coffin in Egypt, which is nice. Big spending, I guess. And he makes his brothers promise him in the same way that his father made him promise, that, don't let me die here, take my bones and bury them somewhere, which is very interesting. Like, why they just don't do it when he dies? Let's just skip the embalming part, because if the goal is to take your bones, why are we embalming you? Hello. Which, if my memory serves me correct, I do believe that Moses does eventually end up taking Joseph's bones back to Canaan. And interestingly enough, there's this other segment where Michael and Lucifer, I believe, are arguing over Moses's bones. There's a lot of supernaturalism in this. But it is very, very, very interesting. But I'm glad that we've reached the end of that story. Genesis was interesting. Exodus is going to be even more interesting. I'd be curious to know what have been some of your highlights of this series, of this conversation. Of course, we'll be moving on to Exodus likely next week or the week after. I may take a break next week. We'll see. Which special announcements. We are looking for campus executives to join the BridgeCity Global team, who will get to help out on shows like this. We'd love to have you sharing some of your perspective in these fun and therapeutic, not theological ways. But yeah, I'd love to hear what have been some of the highlights of the book of Genesis. What have been some triggering thoughts for you, or some thoughts that have been triggered for you? And what are you most looking forward to as we get ready to jump into the book of Exodus and carry this on? I know for me, just some highlights that I don't know if we actually talked about in the series, but some definitely things that I've thought about over the book of Genesis, about the book of Genesis over the past few years. One of the biggest things is that the devil's character, or who we're told is the devil. I think we did identify this when we did our first episode, is that the serpent is never identified as the devil. The serpent is never identified as Lucifer. The serpent is never identified as the sun and morning star, or the bright and morning star. The serpent is just identified as a serpent. And so far, we've made it through the entire book, all 50 chapters, and it seems to be that the serpent was the only righteous character in the entire book. The serpent was the only person who told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. God is a liar from the very beginning, and likely, likes naked in the garden parties, and gets mad when people put their clothes back on. God kills innocent children because some of the adults are killing each other. Yeah, it just God doesn't come off as a good guy in the book of Genesis. But not only that, the people who are purported to be the most faithful or adherent to God also come off as just horrible. Abraham violates the rights of women, as does Sarah. They are also both horrible parents, as is all of their children that are featured. This is just like, if you learn anything from the book of Genesis, you learn how not to be human. Which, and I say that the only reason I say those things, and I say them with that type of veracity and viscosity, is because there are people who still hold on to this book as the quintessential paramount paragon of morality and goodness. And I do want us to wrestle with, what does it mean if a person measures their goodness by these scriptures, as opposed to their actual interactions with other humans, with other people? If you believe that the principles, the ideologies, the characters, and the God in this book represent the highest good of humanity, then you run the risk of dehumanizing humanity, trying to make it conform to this utter foolishness. I think those are my closing thoughts on the book of Genesis. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today for this ex-pastor. Well, that's right, but Bible study with an ex-pastor. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Do a scavenger hunt to find all the ways. I call it a scavenger hunt because there's so many ways you can get involved with the community. Find a way to get in, and we'd love to have you. You can join us on Discord, Patreon, YouTube, right here. Check out our merch. Make sure to share this video and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, be the bridge. I'll holla.